Two new members, Mitch O'Farrell and Felipe Fuentes. And since we have two new members, I won't call any items on consent this time. We'll just go through all the items. So let's begin with item number one.
Item number one, Personnel Department report relative to the Consolidated Reasonable Accommodation Report for the third quarter of fiscal year 2012-13.
And I don't know if this item is of particular great controversy, but why don't you go into a little bit of detail just so our new members understand what this item's all about.
Sure. Raylan Napper, Personnel Department. This is a regularly recurring report on the city's efforts to reasonably accommodate employees with temporary and permanent restrictions due to industrial or non-industrial injury, so on the job or off the job. It covers the third quarter of the last fiscal year and compares this quarter to the prior quarter in the last year, or to the same quarter in the prior year. The Workers' Compensation Division tracks employees with industrial injury and illness, and they report light-duty hours worked, which are when an employee receives their salary, but we're getting some work out of them. They may not be doing their full duties, but light duty. It also tracks IOD, injury on duty saved, which is the number of hours times their salary. And it tracks IOD spent. So that's when the employee is receiving their salary, but at home because they can't work at all. And we like to see light duty hours and IOD saved increase and IOD spent decrease. Attachment 1 shows the department and city totals. Page 1 is the current fiscal year. Page 2 is the prior fiscal year. And in this third quarter, light-duty hours went down just slightly by 1,500. It's a slight negative trend. But IOD saved increased by about 4%, which is positive. IOD spent increased, but only by a negligible amount, 0.06%. So kind of holding steady, which is fairly positive. And then also the Equal Employment Opportunity Division of the Personnel Department reports reasonable accommodation requests within departments and as well as citywide placement activity. So attachment 2 shows the reasonable accommodation requests within departments, the number received, the number granted, the number denied, and the number still pending. And then attachment 3 is the citywide placement activity. So once a department has exhausted their efforts in trying to accommodate an employee with a disability, they're forwarded to citywide placement, and the personnel department looks at all departments to try to find a place for them.
Do you see anything remarkable in this particular report that you want to flag for us particularly?
No, numbers look good. There are fewer referrals to citywide placement, and we've gotten those numbers down, placed a number of people over the last year. And the numbers within departments are fairly steady, nothing too unusual, so they're doing their due diligence as well.
Any questions? Well, if hearing none, without objection, we will note and file the personnel report. Item number 2.
Item number 2 is CAO report relative to salary range adjustments for the classification of Chief Airports Engineer, class code 7274/1.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm Errol Griffin. I'm with the Employee Relations Division of the Office of the City Administrative Officer. This particular item came about as a result of the creation of a new classification exclusive to airports. That classification was Senior Airport Engineer. And at the time, though the department recognized that this position would eventually report to a Chief Airports Engineer, we didn't take action or recommend at that time that a salary adjustment be made for the Chief Airports Engineer to which that position would report. The reason we didn't do it is because the position had not been filled. We had not filled the newly created positions. Had we taken the action on the chief airport engineers at that time, we would have been obligated to pay the new salary that was adopted at that time. So the airport has now filled some of the positions, and they are reporting to the chief airports engineer. By virtue of either the ad code and or memoranda of understanding, we require a salary differential of 5.5%, in the purpose of which is to avoid salary compaction. And that is the reason for the recommendation with regard to the new salary ranges for chief airport engineer. And if you have any questions of the department, they're also here.
Could you explain the concept of salary compaction, why it's important to deal with in the city of Los Angeles?
Okay. The city has, as a part of its administrative code, that there is a differentiation between supervisory positions and those that report to them. And that minimum amount is what is referred to as either 2 premium levels or 1 salary step, which translates as 5.5% of salary. And so that is whenever it occurs, that because perhaps there are different bargaining unit actions where everyone is not having the same adjustments, if there's any salary compaction or anything where 2 salaries are less than 5.5%, then we have provisions in our ad code and in our MOUs to provide what we call a salary differential, supervisory differential. That supervisory differential is the 5.5%. So essentially what we're asking for here is a resolving of the difference, and thereby we don't then go in and pay the 5.5%, the additional 5.5%. It's already built into the salary difference.
Okay, any questions, colleagues? If not, I would ask that we adopt the CAO recommendations without objection.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item number 3.
Item 3, Personnel Department report relative to the Employee Development Report for fiscal year 2011-12.
Hi, I'm Michael Gold with the Personnel Department. So we provided you a report. It's our annual training survey from fiscal year 2011-2012. The administrative code requires that the Personnel Department maintain a comprehensive training program for all city employees, and it requires that we report to council annually on the progress of training in all city departments except for the proprietary departments. So again, this report covers 2011-2012. We include in the report some of the progress the Personnel Department was making in training. During that time, we were working on our transition from primarily providing classroom training to providing online training. So at that time, we made progress on the learning management system that was developed by our vendor. That's where online courses are posted, and it also allows us to track people who are taking the training on that system. We developed a couple of custom courses for the city at that time. We completed a course on supervision and another course on customer service. And we made progress on a couple of other courses, one on reasonable accommodations and one on EEO. And at that time, the Emergency Management Department started their course on the disaster service worker. We also created a training portal, which is a website that kind of supplements the online training academy. We provide a lot of information about various training courses for city employees. During this time, there was other vendors providing training to the city. We had over 10,000 employees trained on sexual harassment. That's for supervisors. There was a workplace prevention program where over 200 employees were trained. And through our employee assistance program, we trained over 2,000 employees on various topics. Now, the meat of this report, the biggest part, has to do with training that other departments provided for their employees. So we have data in that report from 39 departments providing over 2,500 training courses to their employees. The largest audience for that training were the professional employees, also skilled craft employees, and officials and administrators. The most common topics were field-specific professional and technical topics, policy awareness, and management topics. Appendix A of your report, there we've broken out of those 2,500 different courses, there were 679 that were mandated. And we go through and report on data that we have from 377 of those courses, and 93% of the courses that we have data on the compliance rates, 93% were in compliance. Appendix B provides information on all the non-mandated courses. The departments that provided the most were airports, police, and library. And finally, Appendix C provides information on tuition reimbursement. There's not a citywide program for tuition reimbursement, but there are 8 different departments that have funding for that, and 779 people throughout the city were able to benefit from tuition reimbursement.
So what do we do with folks that don't take mandated courses? Because you said there were 93% compliance. What do we do with the 7%? Do they just skate, or do we have some sort of follow-up to make sure they do what they're supposed to do?
The departments that are not reporting full compliance tell us that a lot of times those employees are on leaves and are unavailable for different reasons, and they are being tracked, and as soon as they're able to take those courses, they do. So there are staff in each of those departments whose job it is to make sure that those employees will eventually take the courses that they're supposed to take.
So it's not just random 7% that try to duck out on the courses.
It's not random, no.
Okay. And how easy are these to access, and how do people know about the ones that are not mandatory but might be helpful to them?
Well, the ones that the personnel department is providing, we hope it's becoming more and more easy to access. We've had several meetings with training coordinators for each department where we had a formal launch of this new online training academy, where we have the training portal, which provides all kinds of information to help people access the training. And there are some issues with employees that don't have computer access, and we're working on different strategies to try to get them access as well. So figuring out ways we could train people who work out in the field and others like that.
Hey, any questions? Mr. Fuentes, Mr. O'Farrell?
Just quickly, do you eventually get 100% compliance? Eventually? Notwithstanding the leave
I think
absence and such?
we probably get in the high 90s, like over 95%, but I can't say we get 100%.
Okay, so no other questions. Without objection, we will note and file this report. Thank you. Item number 4.
CEO report and ordinance relative to the implementation of the 2010-14 salaries, benefits, and other terms and conditions of employment for the airport peace officers unit.
Hello, Councilmember. How are you? Paul Gerard, CAO Employee Relations Division.
If you could walk us through this.
Sure. We started this process probably about a year and a half ago, negotiating a successor MOU for the Airport Peace Officers Association. In about November of last year, we declared impasse. We went through a fact-finding process that was completed in February of 2013. After that process, we took the matter into EERC. We were instructed to pursue unilateral implementation of the city's last best and final offer. Early May, we asked the association to take the matter to a vote. They rejected the last best and final offer. We took the matter into EERC twice more and were instructed the same, to pursue unilateral implementation of the last best and final offer that we made months prior. The last best and final in this case is consistent with other sworn MOU that we have reached in the recent past, going back to 2009. The COLA structure is the same. Any other changes are consistent and the same as all the other sworn units in the city.
And I wonder if you could explain the elimination of the special assignment bonuses.
Yes, we made a proposal to implement a rotation policy, and when we proposed eliminating bonuses, we also permanently upgraded positions that were receiving bonuses from a airport peace officer 2 to an airport peace officer 3, thereby basically memorializing and making permanent the pay differential that they would be receiving. So it's really an upgrade of positions to give the airport flexibility in staffing and structuring its organization.
And the 2% bonus for officers assigned to airfield patrol, is that pension-based or not?
Non-pension-based.
Non-pension-based. Yes. Okay. Any other questions? My colleagues? I see we have a representative from the union. I don't know if you'd like to speak or not. I'll give you the opportunity if you would.
I apologize, I was on the other side of the city hall. Take that one. Thank you. Well, I think you can hear me. We're close enough, right?
Well, you probably should do it anyway for the record.
Got it. Good afternoon. Sorry I'm late. I'm Marshall McLean. I'm the president of Los Angeles Airport Peace Officers Association regarding this matter. What you just heard was not exactly correct. In fact, while this process has been ongoing, we just found out that the LAPD K-9 unit that represents the K-9 units at the airport got a 16.5% raise on top of the raise they already had, which they were already about 11% higher than what we get. Just so you understand how that all works, those LAPD police officers that are assigned to the airport are paid 100% by the airport. That goes for their fringe benefits, everything. So, I mean, as far as unions go, the oldest union argument is equal work for equal pay. The fact that there's LAPD officers that go through the exact same academy as our officers, every LAPD officer that works at the airport actually has to be trained by the airport police to work at the airport by federal law to meet those standards. But yet we don't have the same retirement at all. We don't have the same pay. We don't have the same wage, same benefits. So when it respect to the airport, all of those salary, benefits, wage, all those things we're referring to are paid for by LAWA. So it's just a matter of disrespect and disingenuine by the gentleman to my right to come forward and say that everything's in par when it's really not. It'd be totally different if we were comparing an airport police officer's job to an LAPD officer's job on the street. We're comparing to what LAPD officers do at the airport while they're at the airport. So it is apples to apples, it is oranges to oranges, however you want to put it. It's just the simple fact is it's been this way for a long time, and we're trying to change that. And every time we get a little bit closer, we get slapped on both sides of our face. When we started the negotiations prior to this contract, the CAO came to us and said, look, the city's in a bad way. We cannot have LAPD officers and airport police officers in the same academy and the wage being different. LAPD officers took a 20% pay cut. We would like the airport police officers to also take a 20% pay cut. So it would be a shared sacrifice. We agreed to that with the understanding that we would make up for it when the contract came back, because the airport is not in any kind of financial straits or any type of detrimental issues over the past, I'd say, at least 5 to 6 years. So the fact that we haven't had a COLA, I believe our last COLA was in 2008. The fact that we went to arbitration, the fact that there was an actual decision that was made, and when I spoke to individuals on EERC, they had never even read the arbitrator's report. which was a little disconcerting to say the least, that it was just blindly going on with the recommendations of the CAO. The mere fact that our contract's not negotiated by the airport CAO is still, I don't quite understand that process, because the money is all controlled by the airport, not by the city. So my last and final point is what I said, we're just asking for equal work for equal pay. And I thank you for your time.
I thank you. I'd have to assume, and yes, in all honesty, in EERC, I don't think we go into this kind of detail and background always. I assume the reason to try and keep the contract more modest is that if we do it for proprietary departments and we're holding our generally funded employees to a much tighter scale, it's very difficult for us to do that, because then they look at us and say, well, you gave them a pretty generous deal, and yet here we're having a hard time. So that may be a piece of it. I don't know that we've really had a serious discussion of any effort to have the airport police get salaries that are more commensurate to LAPD folks at the airport that do the same work. And maybe that's a discussion for a closed session. But it's certainly something that gives me pause. And we haven't noticed a closed session here, so I don't think that we can do that, although I'd ask our attorney if we can.
Go into closed session?
Yeah, I'm assuming not, because we didn't notice that.
You have to agendize it.
I mean, this has been discussed in some detail at EERC, but I don't recall, and maybe there's others here that could set me straight, that we ever really discussed that there had been a prior effort to try and equalize the salaries between LAPD officers at the airport and our airport police. I don't know if you were...
When it comes to the negative side, like we're expected to take the same pay cuts, but when it comes to trying to equalize the pay...
Well, honestly, you wouldn't know the answer because you weren't there in the closed session, so I'd have to...
There's been discussion, but I couldn't say it in open session because it was discussed in closed session.
I'm trying to recall it, though. Did we actually have a serious discussion about this particular issue?
We had serious discussions about this juxtaposed to other MOUs and the representation of those MOUs.
Okay, and I have more further questions I would ask you that I can't.
Sorry.
Is there any harm done if we hold this to our next PAW meeting?
It's at your will.
But I mean, there's no timetable that we're trying to meet particularly.
My colleague might have something to add, but I don't believe so.
Yeah, I was just going to say what's before you today is what was the CAO was authorized by the EERC to bring forward, and all those issues were discussed. So this is consistent with instructions from the EERC?
But to answer your question, we're not on any timetable.
Okay, yeah, I might want to have some further discussions on this issue, on that particular element, and bring this back. Mr. Fuentes, you had a question?
Sure. I guess this is a question for the CAO primarily, but also for Mr. McLean. It seems like there's two issues here. It sounds as if we're discussing sort of parity for the services that LAPD and LAWA police sort of deploy. And I'm wondering if that's okay to sort of have that conversation, because it sounds like it needs to be had, but then you've got this imposition of benefits that will be slowed down if we don't execute this. And so I'm trying to understand, is there a legal concern, because it sounds like we've got a last and best and final offer instructions by our EERC committee. Is the city of Los Angeles and LAWA as a result on the hook if we delay any of these salary increases? Because it seems to me that these are once we approve them, get them to council, they're then to be given to the employees, separate and aside from the discussion that I think Mr. Koretz wants to have, which is discussing parity for for the different agencies. Do we run into any kind of problem here if we don't execute, if the city council doesn't execute this instruction?
Hi, Hugo Rossiter, Deputy City Attorney. If you're asking, is there a legal issue in and of itself?
Would we be on the hook for interest and payments and additional penalties if we don't give the employees of this bargaining unit, their 2% effective July 1st of 2012, and then their subsequent 2%, et cetera, et cetera? How much running room do we actually have?
Well, no, there aren't any penalties or interests because this isn't obligatory at this point, because until it's enacted by the council, it isn't a real thing anyway. So no, the answer to that is I don't think there's any legal bar. So it's really a matter of a political decision to implement that which has gone through the EERC negotiations impasse process.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself earlier. Carolyn Cooper with the CAO's office. One other thing to maybe note is that the unilateral implementation of this, it is only through to June 30th of 2014, so it's less than a year away that it concludes, and Mr. Gerard would be back at the bargaining table with Mr. McCain. So if there are items that you think might be included in the future, that can always be addressed by EERC for future bargaining instructions, which are actually not too far away.
Well, that's a fair point to consider, too.
Yeah, so I just wanted to put that out there.
I guess my point is that there's a larger discussion, it sounds like, that needs to be had about sort of pension, post-certifications, et cetera, for this unit. And I'm just wondering out loud if it doesn't make sense to make sure that if the city is willing to give these additional sort of benefits, understanding that it's not to the satisfaction of the representation of those workers, but to delay it means that they're not getting these increases in pay, and we're just right around the corner from hopefully a more robust conversation with the bargaining unit. And so I guess I'm always willing to adjust the accounting in the future, but I'd hate to have folks not sort of get what has been decided ought to be given, despite the fact that it's not to the satisfaction of their leadership.
I mean, it just, the controller's office could speak to this better than we can, but it does in some way exacerbate the retroactivity, the retroactive implementation, which we're already doing in part. I mean, if you just add up the raw numbers, it's basically, by the time the contract period ends, it's 7%
right.
In raw numbers. But, we've been through the entire impasse proceedings. We've done everything we're supposed to do at this point. Probably sooner rather than later would be better.
Well, I defer to the chair at that point. I see two issues here. Is something that the city direction is in terms of, again, not to the satisfaction of the unit, but we could sort of be done with this part and then hopefully have a robust conversation in the future. But anyhow, I defer to the chair on this.
And I'm struggling with it myself. Mr. McLean, you have a comment.
I've been at the airport now since 2002. I've been with the city since 97. While I've been at the airport, I cannot recall one contract that we've had on time. So there's always been a situation where there's been retroactivity, which, for the record, won't impact the city of Los Angeles because those monies come from WAWA. So I'd rather us have the robust conversation and get it right than trying to go back and fix it, because that's what we've been trying to do my whole career at the airport, is trying to go back and fix it. And there always comes a point in time where, why didn't you negotiate that on last contract? Well, we tried, and it was shut down. So this is the first time that I recall we ever actually went to impasse and didn't just accept what that offer was. So if there needs to be a robust conversation, we'd welcome that robust conversation to actually have the conversation, which we've never had.
Well, I think we can at least try to start the conversation. I can't guarantee that we won't be back here in a couple weeks approving the same thing, but I'd like to delay it till the next meeting, and then we'll try to have that conversation. If nothing else, it may be a a stronger direction to address the issue in the negotiations that will be happening rather quickly, I suspect.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
So,
By the way, just for clarification, I'm only at the head of the table, but just want to make sure you understand that I have Paul Adams here from the airport, Tom Muma from the airport, Art Volikon, the Director of Security and Safety from the airport, and Chief Gannon from the airport. So the team is not the CAO in a vacuum. I think it's important to understand that. The team is HR, public safety, Samson Mengustu, Paula's direct report, intimately involved, Gina Marie Lindsay. So just want to make sure you know that we're not operating just on our own.
and we do understand that. It's not just the
an important
CAO.
point to make, though.
And I don't know if any of the individuals that you've just mentioned want to have any input into this, or if we just go...
If there are any unanswered questions, there's a wealth of knowledge behind you. Otherwise, we can just defer the item if you'd like.
Okay. I would recommend that without any objection. I'll suggest that we defer that item for the period till the next meeting, and we have some discussions in the interim on this subject.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And item number 5.
Item 5, continued from June 4, 2013. LADWP report relative to proposed amendment to the MOU for the Los Angeles Department of Water and Low Dispatchers Unit and cost of living adjustments for January 1st, 2014 and January 1st, 2015.
Oh, and first, if I could go back to the last item, if we could also ask that be agendized as a closed session item. Okay, and back to item 5.
Okay, Rose Garcia with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, Director of Labor Relations. What you have before you is an MOU amendment for the Load Dispatchers Association. We're recommending an amendment to the MOU, which includes cost of living increase for 2014 and 2015, a 2-year term to keep it at the most minimal term, because we normally go for 4 years, but not knowing what the economics are going to be for the next 4 years, we negotiated a 2-year term. Healthcare concessions, which were consistent with the bargaining instructions from the EERC as well. And in addition, an elimination of a retention bonus that they were getting, of 5% that we negotiated back or away.
Anything unusual about this action that we should know about?
It's the first MOU, our first union to give health care concessions at the Department of Water and Power. So this is the first one to come forward, first one willing to come forward. Both management and labor are in agreement with this particular agreement. It is consistent with keeping the compaction and the comparity issues as well, because these employees also supervise other unions that already got their 2% increase. It is a minimal 2%. It's 2%. It's the CPI, 2% low, 4% high. The CPI currently is at 1.8, so we don't anticipate it'll be greater than 2% by next month, because it's an August to August comparison. It's effective January 2014.
Okay. Any questions? Comments? If not, I think we will move the item without objection.
Thank you.
And I believe that is all the business before us. No public speakers under public comment, so we are adjourned.